Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So it is Wednesday, and on Wednesday is like one of my favorite days. It's one of my favorite days because I love PMQs, Prime Minister's questions. Questions to the Prime Minister. Love it, love it. You have no idea how much I love it. Before I jump into it, however, let me check my volume. Because I could be doing this right now and the volume is like at 3 and nobody hears me at all. I'm just waving my hands like a maniac. All right, good. Everything's good and playback is good. Perfect. Questions to the Prime Minister. Now, I'm going to watch this with my audience. I love watching this. And I think what I'm probably going to end up doing is do this once each Wednesday. Prime Minister Questions Wednesday, something to that effect. But nevertheless, this is the one that they had today. Jeremy Corbyn, Theresa May. There's just been a high-profile figure that's left. I can't think of her name. Rudd, I believe. Left in shame over the Windrush issue. So I'm curious on what this one is going to be. There have been times where things have happened where Jeremy Corbyn has used Theresa May as a punching bag in this PMQs. Let's see what takes place. He had wind in his sails, no pun intended, in the last few PMQs. Let's see how it goes in this one. So, questions to the Prime Minister, Theresa May versus Jeremy Corbyn.
The infrastructure is there to support those homes and help those local communities. That's exactly what we're doing.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I join the Prime Minister in paying tribute to Michael Martin, former Labour MP for Glasgow Springburn and later Speaker of the House. He worked in the engineering industry in Glasgow. He was active in the then AUEW, and he and I first met when we were fellow organisers in the National Union of Public Employees in the 1970s, campaigning for decent public sector pay and a national minimum wage. Michael loved the community he represented, loved his family, and our deepest thoughts and sympathies go to him, his family, at this present time. Mr. Speaker, did the Prime Minister feel the slightest pang of guilt when the Home Secretary was forced to resign due to the failures of her predecessor?
Can I say to the Right Honourable...
Wait, that's brutal. If I am not mistaken, the predecessor was Theresa May herself. Oh, I love that. I love that. That burns. Let's keep going. Let's keep going.
But I think it might be helpful if I first update the House on the actions the government has taken and is continuing to take in relation to the Windrush. In relation to the Windrush generation. Because my right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, will be addressing the House on this later today. We all share the ambition to make sure we do right by members of the Windrush generation, and that's why he will be announcing a package of measures to bring transparency on the issue, to make sure that the House is informed, to reassure members of this House, but more importantly, to reassure those people who have been directly affected. Speed is of the essence, and my right honourable friend will be commissioning a full review of lessons learned, independent oversight and external challenge, with the intention of reporting back to this House before we rise for the summer. And the review will have full access to all relevant information in the Home Office, including policy papers and casework decisions.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, this was a crisis made in the Home Office by successive Home Secretaries. And only a week ago today, the member for Hastings and Rye, then Home Secretary, was denying there were any targets in front of the Home Affairs Select Committee. On Monday, the Prime Minister told the media, when I was Home Secretary, yes, there were targets. One wonders why the Prime Minister didn't tell her Home Secretary about that. And the pain that's been caused to the Windrush generation needs to be resolved very rapidly and full compensation paid as quickly as it can be possibly done, and an understanding of the hurt that they feel. But this isn't the only failure of this government or the only failure of its policies. The government used to talk about a long-term economic plan. But now, Mr. Speaker, we're the slowest growing economy in the G7. The Chancellor, sitting 2 places along from her, told the House his view was positively Tiggerish of the British economy, yet it has the worst economic growth figures for 5 years. What plans does the government have to change course to ensure we do get economic growth?
He said, positively Tiggerish. I love that. This is what I mean. I don't know if you've ever watched PMQs back with Tony Blair versus, was it David Cameron? Yeah, Tony Blair versus David Cameron. Yeah, so I used to watch these for a long time, or used to look back in time on them on the PMQs. David Cameron wasn't that great at PMQs before. Like, he used to get the stuffing beat out of him by Tony Blair. Like, I don't like Tony Blair, but Tony Blair was amazing at PMQs, and he had refined it down to a science. He should be doing PMQs in a prison cell right now, but that can't necessarily take away from his skill. He used to beat the stuffing out of David Cameron. When David Cameron first started these PMQs, he used to beat the stuffing out of Jeremy Corbyn. I think what it is, there's a certain style and there's a certain flair that you need to have when you're doing the PMQs. And I think when people first start, they ask questions and they engage as if it's from this kind of just purely conceptual way, and it's not. When in an argument, it's not purely just what you say in, the argument. It's also how you deliver your points, how you get it across, flair. There's overtures. People who watched the debate between JFK and Nixon said that JFK won the debate. People who heard it on the radio thought Nixon won the debate. It's not all just what you say. It's how you say it and what you get it across. Hitting her with the guy saying that he was completely Tiggerish and contrasting that to the slowest growth in the G7. Oh, that's brutal. That's brutal. Let's keep going. And by the way, I compare the Conservative Party to the Democrats in this country. I think these things are somewhat similar. I think they will respond to many of these cases almost the same. It's like the Conservative Party in the UK is literally the Democratic Party in the United States. That is sad, but the fact, I guess you can almost say that the UK is almost like this, no, you can't say that. That's not fair, because the UK is something separate and distinct. Let's take a look at, let's keep going.
First of all, can I say to the right honourable gentleman, on the Windrush generation, I was Home Secretary when some of these decisions were taken and mistakes were made about individual cases, and I've apologised for that. The former Home Secretary also apologised for that. The right honourable gentleman is right in saying these are decisions that have been taken under successive Home Secretaries, including under the last Labour government. And if he wants to talk about the economy, let's just see what we've seen in our economy in recent weeks. Day-to-day spending in surplus for the first time in 16 years. The lowest net borrowing in over a decade. Exports of goods and services at a record high. Employment at a record high, and real wages up. That's a Conservative government delivering an economy fit for the future.
Mr. Speaker, 4 facts about the economy. Mr. Speaker, more people in debt, more people using food banks, more people sleeping on our streets, and more children in poverty.
Yes, I love this. Fucking A, man. This is why I like Jeremy Corbyn. She's given him these, we've lowered our debt, we've done this and we've done this. And Jeremy Corbyn is making the point of, yeah, you have more people in debt, you have more people in poverty, you have more people using food banks. The measure of your society is not your stats. The measure of your society is the happiness of the people in your country. And if the decisions that you're making are making those people's lives worse and more miserable at the expense of a top 1%, then yeah, you failed. That means you failed. If more people are going to food banks, you fundamentally failed. I don't care what your top 1% gets. You have failed if the people in your country aren't necessarily living a lifestyle that they think is, let's say, acceptable for just human life or decency. His message to some degree boils down to humanism, boils down to some degree to just morality, but it also boils down to public health. It's not healthy for people to be living in these conditions in this way, under this much stress, for endured period of times, when they don't have to be that way. Your society doesn't have to be this way. These are policies that Theresa May is taking and this government is taking. He's putting that on trial. I love it. Love it, love it, love it.
And the consequences of decisions made by the Chancellor of the Exchequer are that the NHS is suffering the longest funding squeeze in history. It's sent our health service into an all-year-round crisis. Will the Prime Minister apologise to NHS patients waiting longer than ever for the worst A&E waiting times on record?
By the way, he's making another good point. This government has lurched from one disaster to another. If you remember, London all of a sudden had all these stabbings. So it was like people in Britain didn't think they were safe. Then you had this other situation where people were dying in ambulances because the NHS didn't get the resources that it needed. Let's hear a response. Conservatives just have a different way of looking at this. They don't necessarily look at the human element in the decisions that they're making. So, yeah, we have this human misery, but hey, we've given these people a lot of money. It's like, yeah, even in fact, one of the things that you mentioned, well, we were able to save a huge amount of cash. Yes, but at the expense of human life. Human beings matter more than your profits or the profits of your cronies.
Well, I gave the Right Honourable Gentleman some facts about the economy. I can give him some others. More people in work and actually fewer children in absolute poverty under this government. And when it comes to the National Health Service, since November, my Right Honourable friend, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has announced £10 billion extra for the National Health Service. But I have also said that we want to ensure that the National Health Service is able to operate on a long-term plan. That's why we are conducting a review to produce that long-term plan with sustainable multi-year funding. That's the sensible approach to take. Not just to say this is all about money, but to say how can we ensure that the NHS is the NHS that will deliver for people in the future. That's about funding. It's also about reforming the NHS to make sure patients get the right treatment.
I can tell you now, in comparison with the Democratic Party, and it's make the assumption, or at least that's my that's my worldview on this. If that woman is a Democrat, what's coming out that woman's mouth is essentially code for privatization. We're going to privatize. We need to reform the NHS. We need to privatize the NHS. I guarantee you that is what she's talking about. She's using coded language to say it. Let's keep going. Let's see what he has to say.
Mr. Speaker, not only was March the worst month on record in A&E departments, it was also the worst month for cancelled operations. There are 100,000 vacancies for NHS staff, and the Prime Minister personally intervened to overrule the Health Secretary and the Home Secretary when they asked for a relaxation of visa rules in order to recruit staff to work in our NHS. But it's not just the NHS where the government is damaging our public services. In January, the Education Secretary promised that no school would see a cut in its funding. Last week, he was invited to repeat that pledge and refused. I wonder why. Will the Prime Minister now tell parents, teachers and students the truth, that the school's budget is in fact being cut in real terms all over the country?
No, the Right Honourable Gentleman is wrong. What we are doing is ensuring that there is more money available to schools. We are ensuring that we are protecting that core budget because we want to ensure that every child, regardless of the background, gets the education that they need and the education that fulfills their potential. And that's why, once again, it's not just a question of the money you put in, it's about how you spend the money you are spending. And that's why I'm pleased to say that 1.9 million more children are in good or outstanding schools under this government, and education standards are going up under this government. That's more opportunities for our young people.
Jeremy Corbyn!
Mr. Speaker, it is quite astonishing that the Education Secretary has been corrected by the UK Statistics Authority. The IFS says that schools' budgets are being cut, and the Prime Minister still appears to be in denial. It's not just in NHS and education.
To be honest, unless I misheard, it's not so much that she's in denial. I think she's making the argument that whether we cut it or not, it's how we're spending the money, and how we're spending the money is an effective way. Jeremy Corbyn is kind of making this point. You're cutting people's budgets. You're cutting the school's budgets. Your argument for how you use the money and everything else is just somewhat of a, it's this obfuscation of you're cutting their budgets. Let's keep going. He was like, the Prime Minister is in denial. I love that.
Where this government is damaging our public services. Mr. Speaker, it is also about police budgets. The previous Home Secretary claimed there was no link between police numbers and serious violent crime, yet Home Office civil servants said there is a link. Who does the Prime Minister think is right?
Well, can I say, first of all, on the issue of crime and police budgets, of course, we are making available this year £450 million more for police forces across the country. We have been protecting police budgets, which is in direct contrast to what was suggested to me I should do by the former Shadow Home Secretary, the former Labour member, now the Mayor for Manchester, when he suggested 5 to 10% cuts could be given in police budgets. But can I also say to the right honourable gentleman that he talks about the issue of numbers and the relationship between police numbers and crime. His own shadow police minister has said in terms that there isn't that relationship between police funding and the number of crimes that take place. Once again, it's how we ensure we're dealing with these issues. It's ensuring that the police are able to deal with the challenges and crimes of today, and that's what we're doing with our serious violence strategy, with our National Crime Agency, taking action across the board to ensure that our police are able to keep people safe.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Mr. Speaker, our Shadow Police Minister was pointing out that there's been a £2.3 billion cut in police budgets in the last Parliament, and it's her government that is underfunding our police force. 21,000 police officers have lost their jobs since 2010. 6,700 police and community support officers lost their jobs. In the meantime, violent crime is rising, and sadly, there are deaths from knife crime on the streets of most cities, particularly in London.
This is a particularly effective strategy. I love this. I mean, it's prosecutorial. Here are your failings and here are your sins. And for the most part, your sins are that you are not funding your government and you are running your government in this kind of, austerity-driven way. And he's kind of making this point, you don't have to do that. You're doing this in a way that's adversely affecting the citizenry of your country. And her response is, well, we're doing these cuts. In some cases, she's squirrely about it. But ultimately, yes, she's doing these cuts. But her response is always, well, it's how you spend the money. It's not what you spend the money on. Jeremy Corbyn is like, look, you have people getting knifed all over Britain. There's a relationship between the money that you're putting into this agency versus the knife crime. The moment that you start cutting services, knife crime started to increase. And she's like, there's no link between those two things. Okay, there's no link between those two things. There's no link between the number of cops versus the number of people getting knifed on the streets. Fair enough. People dying in ambulances. And you're making this argument that, we're investing in the NHS in a way it needs to be invested in. It's like, but there are people dying in ambulances. If there are people dying in ambulances, clearly you don't have enough services to deal with those things. It would imply... It's almost this thing of inflation versus deflation. It's like you don't have enough resources to deal with those things. You're not giving your government what it needs to actually sustain the people who are in that particular government. Clearly, the NHS needs more. That's his point. Clearly, your services, your police system needs more. I love the argument. It's a damning argument. You could show one disaster after the next that Theresa May has lurched her government towards from one to the next. Now they're in the middle of Brexit. And yeah, I think it's effective. Here are your failings. You didn't invest in this and look at the result. Well, I mean, we were using the money in a particular way. You didn't invest in this, and look at the result. Well, we're using the money in a particular way. Okay. I like it.
Mr. Speaker, the economy is slowing, homelessness is rising, more children are living in poverty, the Home Office in chaos, and the government making a complete shambles of the Brexit negotiations. They're damaging our NHS, damaging our children's schools, cutting police as crime scores. And, Mr. Speaker, they claim to be strong and stable. With council tax rising by more than 5% all over the country, isn't the truth, Mr. Speaker, facing voters tomorrow, is that with the Tories, you pay more and you get less.
I forgot they're voting tomorrow. I'm wondering why he's hitting her like this. Like the entirety of this was, here are your failings. That's what this was like. All of this. So for the people who are essentially going out to vote, Jeremy Corbyn is rallying the troops for the Labour. God damn it, I love that. I love that. Here are your failings. One list after the next of the things that you failed in. And Theresa May is trying to respond to explain her failings in this way. And so the entirety of this was this kind of prosecutorial thing on the things that she's done while she was in that office. I love it. I love it. Even hitting her with the Windrush stuff in the beginning. The last two secretaries, meaning you, the person who's sitting across from me, your failings on this caused their pain. Fucking hey, I love it. I love it. I love it. Let's hear her respond. Let's hear her respond. It's only fair.
More funding going into the NHS, more funding going into our schools, more funding going into social care. But if he wants to talk about council tax and the impact of council tax on local residents, well, I suggest he goes to Hazelbourne Road in Clapham. On one side of the road, in a typical home, someone will pay nearly £1,400 in council tax. Now, that, of course, is in Labour-run Lambeth. On the other side of the road, someone in a typical home will pay just over £700 in council tax. That's in Conservative-run Wandsworth. No clearer example can there be that Conservative councils cost you less.
Mr. Peter Boone!
I love that. I love that. That's a call of the troops. That is a rally of the troops. I love it. I love it. That's exactly what he was doing. I forgot that the elections were coming up tomorrow. And because I forgot the elections were coming up tomorrow, looking at this, I didn't have a context for what was taking place. It just was in one section after the next. It was, you did this was the result. You did this was the result. You did this was the result. Going down a list of issues. Here, all of the failings of the Conservative Party. Look at the failings that they brought upon your country and your fellow Brits. Are these the people who you want in office? Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. I love that. That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Let's see who's here. Who is here? That's good news in America. Korea was ramping up under George W. He did nothing. He was worried about North Korea. Why should he be worried today? Nobody cares about the Corbyn stuff. Bashar al-Assad, 1 Corbyn equals 10 Bernie's fronting for the Democratic Party. That is true. Kind of. Oh, I don't want to gut Bernie like that. Oh, that hurts. That hurts. Skip Rock, you argue in a strange way. Is that an American thing? I don't know what Skip Rock said. Yeah, I don't know what Skip Rock said on that one. Corbyn and Bernie are almost identical. Bernie is just aware of the dumbass country he's running in. X Factor 541. X Factor, I maybe, I'm not sure. Partially kind of think so, but not quite. Like, and I know that says a lot, and I don't necessarily think that means anything. I think it means I feel all of that to be true, and yet some of it's not true, if that makes sense. That's the way it feels in a way. It could be that they're in a different space. Because they're in a different space, they have more latitude in the way they can behave. It could be that, yes, they're the same person, and Jeremy Corbyn and the American political system will behave in the same way that Bernie Sanders did. No way to know. No way to know. Like, if Sanders was in a place where he had more political space, more political latitude to move to the left, would he? It seems like, as the Democrats try to ape his position, he moves further to the left. So, I don't know. Would Sanders at some point say, we need to nationalize the rail stations? I don't think so. Would Corbyn say it? I would not be surprised in the least. And I'm not mistaken, I think he has. I don't know, man. I don't know. It's a good question. I don't know the political force or the political weight that would put on Jeremy Corbyn if he was in the American political system. By the same token, I don't know how much space Bernie Sanders would have in a British political system. Who knows? Who knows? Let's see. Cognitive alchemists. Americans often have no idea what the hell they're talking about. Politically, they say they're center-right, but to support a ton of leftist policies. Cognitive alchemists. It's because don't look at the American political system from the standpoint of just policies. You have to look at it from the standpoint of culture. People can move a party in a particular way just based on who the person is. They tend to identify with the people themselves. Yeah, if that makes sense. It's like when Trump was running, Trump would say something to the effect of, I'm not going to have these wars. And people loved it. Now, these are supposedly right-wingers. I'm going to raise the minimum wage to like $10. Right-wingers loved it. It was more about Trump. It was less about the policies. I don't know if the policies matter as much as the personality or the culture itself. If there was something else, if there was another party where you didn't have all of these identities and all this other stuff accrued around, how would those people gravitate towards what that party espouses? That's the question. Is it purely this thing of culture, or is it one of those things of these are the parties, these are the things that these people actually like? If that makes sense. Hope that makes sense. Corbyn didn't have to support Hillary Clinton because the Labour Party didn't rig the election against him. X Factor 541. That is true. And he is also not in that political system. Adored Pariah. I see it feels like a lot of Futurama episodes with the clone president running against each other, pretending to be different but owned by the same entity. Yes, yes. It does, right? It does. But I do think Corbyn is different. I do think Jeremy Corbyn is different. I think Sanders, to some degree, is different. I think Sanders has a lot of political weight being put upon him. But I think Corbyn is different. I could be wrong. But I'll end it here. PMQs, love it. I think I'm going to have PMQs Wednesday. I think they're great to watch. Not to mention, I have to be honest, when I first started watching these, it wasn't for politics. It was just because I enjoyed the back and forth between the two people, the people arguing back and forth. And some point along the way, but when I became more politically aware, it became that much more interesting to watch what these guys talking about, because sitting here from America, there's often a tether between American politics and British politics. It's fucking fascinating, actually. So, I'll leave it here. Alright, guys. If you enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.